Tonight, on this emergency backup plan edition of the Small Interview, our guest is either a friend, a crew member, or it could be somebody found just off the street and dragged into the studio to be interviewed. Hello, Road Valley, and welcome to another edition of the Small Interview with Glamour Dave. I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow, and today is an emergency show production edition of the show, as I just recently was able to secure this time slot, and I was quickly able to secure as my special guest for this episode a friend of mine, Jen Ambrose, who I met just over a year ago when I was preparing for last year's Christmas special for the studio. And so Jen's been able to be a musical guest on my show, the So Not So Late Night Glamour Dave show, and she was part of last year's Christmas specials, done really great work and been a great benefit to me. She's a wonderful singer, a wonderful musician who performs all around the Road Valley, and so we have the opportunity to talk to Jen about her life, what brought her into doing her career in music, and so we have Jen Ambrose to talk to this afternoon, and so we welcome Jen to the show.
Thank you, David. It's quite the honor to be here. My first time being interviewed in this way.
Yeah,
by you,
okay,
so
really? Oh, wow.
Kind of cool. So.
All right. Well, I'm very happy to have you on the show. You've been really supportive and helpful to me with all the other stuff that you've come into and helped with. And so I wanted to really take this opportunity to really kind of explore your story and kind of learn what brought you into music and what you're doing today here in the Valley.
Yeah, well, today I'll have a gig, as you know, after this show. But the story of music for me started when I was about 4 years old.
Oh, okay.
And I noticed that the choir, there's a church choir at the church I was going to, and I wanted to be part of the choir.
Yeah.
And that was back in New York State, and that church, incidentally, is a church where Samuel Clemens or Mark Twain had been married, and Harriet Beecher Stowe had written some of her books there, and so there's actually a long legacy and history of the Park Church in Elmira, New York.
Okay.
But at the time, there was a really amazing choral director. And so I, at 4 years old, decided I wanted to be in the church choir. Yeah. So I was told I was a little bit young, since I was barely reading, and they said, you got to learn how to read music, you have to, sing, but you have to also read music. And I said, oh, I can do that, I can do it. And they said, okay, you're young, but we're going to let you in. So, and that was my first experience reading music, and I loved it. It made me realize that I loved singing.
Yeah, right.
And most of my early experience was with choirs and then student instruments, so flute and oboe, piano, and so that was my start with music.
Well, I find it amazing that you kind of learn that at such a young age. I mean, I think back to what I was doing at 4 and 5, and I can't even remember what the hell I was doing at 4 and 5, let alone have an idea of wanting to do something, like that at that age.
Yeah, it just seemed really important to me, and something that I could kind of sink myself into. And music, as a child, I was a gymnast and I played music. And so I was one of those music nerds that instead of, hanging out with kids at lunch, I'd go and practice music. And and I had another friend of mine, Cindy Golis, who was also a music nerd like me. And we also played the oboe and the flute and the piano together. So, and we were on par with one another. So we could always catch each other and play duets together and things like that. It was kind of nice to have a friend that I could do that with.
Yeah, and I imagine at a certain point, once you were in school and bands became something that to be a part of, that I imagine that you were in every band from that point on.
Well,
through school?
There was only one band.
Oh, okay.
And I was playing oboe in the band through middle school, through
Yeah.
high school, and then in the choirs. And so I had
Yeah.
a couple of different choirs that I was in. And unfortunately, my band teacher became less inspiring, so I let my instruments go. But I continued singing, and so even when I left home and went into college, I didn't study music, but I was always doing music.
Right, okay.
So despite studying anthropology and traveling in Ecuador and being in the jungle and doing
Oh,
a whole
wow.
array of other things, music was still a part of that. And,
Yeah.
and until I finally learned the guitar, because I realized
Yeah.
that I wanted to write music
Right.
also. So that afforded me the space to learn the guitar, but also accompany myself
Yeah.
while singing. So that became that
Yeah.
part.
Guitar seems to me, based on what I know of the stories of other musicians, that guitar seems to be one of those fundamental instruments that gets people into the craft of songwriting, right? It's either a guitar or piano, right? I mean, rarely have I ever come across musician stories where it was some other instrument other than piano or guitar that got them into the songwriting process, right?
Yeah, yes. For me, it was that.
Yeah.
It really was, because I didn't have a piano to carry around with me.
Right,
The
yeah.
guitar became that
portable instrument.
Portable instrument, yeah, that medium.
Yeah, and guitar always seems to be like piano. It seems to offer kind of like, I don't know, the widest range of dynamic instrumentality in terms of the sounds, and that kind of seems to accent that songwriting creative process, right?
I think that's the goal.
Yeah, right.
That's the goal. And for me, the more that I'm learning it, the more it becomes the voice with my voice.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a slow learner that way. So as I develop my skill with the guitar, it becomes more of that for me.
Yeah, I've got a couple of guitars at home. A PV solid body electric, and I got an Ibanez semi-acoustic. Got a nice little Fender amp, and it's I will profess I am not a master of the guitar. It's more like I hack at the guitar as a relaxation tool.
Oh yeah,
right.
Great.
And it's just something to kind of pull out, and for me, just kind of strum and fiddle with, and I never expect to ever become a master. I don't expect to become a rock and roller. I'm not going to be the lead of any band. It's just a relaxation thing, but it really is a fun thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how just even when you're just kind of relaxing and strumming, that you kind of come across a certain combination of chords, or and all of a sudden you've created this musical tone that's like, wow, that's kind of cool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for musicians like you that are very seriously committed and driven, I mean, and really kind of gain that mastery of the instrument, I mean, that feeling has got to become more like a much more common thing, but something that really infects you and kind of gets you, committed further because, of the experience of the creative process.
There is an addictive quality to it.
Yeah.
There is. And for me, because I've been mostly self-taught with the guitar, have taken some lessons, but not too much. The songwriting process actually has been one of my main teachers.
Yeah.
And so I hear things, and I want to play it on the guitar, but I have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And then I have to figure out how to construct the words around what I'm learning. So the songs, actually, like you're saying, have become my greatest teacher on the guitar, for instance.
Yeah.
So it accelerates my learning process because I hear things that I don't quite know how to do yet. So I have to learn so I can chase down that song that I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certain kinds of chords that, you know, the fingering is
Yeah.
like really complicated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And trying to get the hand just right.
Just right, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, I know it's there. What is this? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some of my favorite songs to learn are old jazz standards.
Yeah, right.
And because the chordings are just these beautiful jazz chords. So,
Yeah.
and then that has infiltrated some of my songs also.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, right, that's this chord. And some people know these things or they're very well studied.
Yes.
So me, I'm a backdoor
Uh-huh.
guitarist, so I kind of learned from the backside in.
So as you've kind of developed your I don't know, your commitment to music in your life, right? I mean, you get exposed to a wide range of different musical types
Oh, yeah.
and styles, right? So what have been like the types and styles of music that really that you
Yeah.
kind of like really got committed to and that kind of influenced what you're doing now?
Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
frankly, that was that was like the main because during the era that I was a young person and a teenager, it was the 80s, and I didn't really connect with the music then, just mostly because I wasn't exposed to very much music, and so I didn't really listen to much popular music.
Yeah.
But then I started listening to Led Zeppelin, and then it cascaded into the music of that whole genre.
Right.
But then the more that I was listening to that, specifically their music, or then the Beatles, or different artists from that era, I noticed they were influenced by all of these other styles.
Yes, right.
So from, Highland, England sounds, Celtic music to old blues. And so really it's the blues then that I was chasing down
Yes, right.
through Zeppelin, say. It's like, well, wait a minute. This music influenced these people because there was that whole train of people from the South in the US who couldn't get an audience because of racial prejudice in the States, so they went to Europe. And then suddenly they influenced that whole generation of British rockers that then influenced the United States and this whole back and forth.
Yeah.
But then that sound, that old Delta blues sound, has all of its roots in gospel and old spiritual songs that many of which came from Africa. So there's this whole bridge that just listening to, say, that one group opened me up to. And I just continue to go deeper into that.
Yeah, well, bands like the Rolling Stones, for example, I mean,
Exactly.
they were like extremely influenced by their exposure to like Robert Johnson,
Yes.
And then that influenced the development of their style of rock and roll music.
Yeah.
And then when they came to the States, one of the very first opening acts that they hired was like B.B. King.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and so it was our British musical counterparts that then kind of really, because of their lack of prejudice against the old South blues players, they really kind of re-interested the American population to our classic blues performers.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And because there's a common thread of just the struggle of being human and using music as a voice for that. And we can all identify with that, whatever our story is.
That's right.
And so, I'm very thankful to those artists for doing what they do and have done.
Yeah, it's, as a kid, I mean, I learned of like B.B. King as a teenager and really was just amazed at how he played the guitar, right? I mean, when I was really kind of gaining interest in the guitar, it was B.B. King and Dwayne Eddy that got me like, it was fascinating. How the hell do they make that sound on a guitar, right?
Yes.
And it drives you to want to learn.
That's
right.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. To emulate that.
So now, like when you're out performing around the valley, I mean, you often describe that you're performing like Americana and jazz, and I mean, you do kind of actually a really good mix of stuff. Um, and but you also have you have focused on your original songwriting. So when you're out performing, I see that you kind of do a good mix of your original stuff and some classic stuff.
I throw it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
At this point, do you kind of equally split from, or is it?
No, all right, I'll be honest. I don't usually create a set list. I don't.
Okay.
I usually kind of go in the moment. So whatever the moment calls out, sometimes I'm just standing there and suddenly I start playing, oh, okay, that's the song I'm going to play now. So it dictates it.
Right.
And it depends on the venue. For certain events, it calls more for my original material, so then I get to do that. Or others, I know that they prefer kind of the jazz feel, so I'll do that and then like throw some of my stuff in there with it. So, it is a pretty even balance. It it depends on the moment and the venue.
And you work with a lot of other musical performers.
I do.
Right? You kind of have your own personal band that you do, and then you also work with John Galfano. And you and John just recently became part of this year's Christmas special together.
We did.
Right?
That was so much fun. Yeah.
And then you also perform with Annieville Blues.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, she's been great.
And and the two of you were in last year's Christmas
Yes, we
special
were,
here,
yeah.
right? And so and from your Facebook, I mean, you keep to a pretty good active schedule of bookings.
It is sometimes, yeah. It just depends on the season and the moment. But yeah, this summer has been very, very busy.
Are there certain is there like a certain period of the year where things slow down here in the Valley consistently?
It's coming up.
Yeah.
Starting to a little bit temper a bit as we go into autumn and the winter. And sometimes I wonder if I'll have gigs again, and then they do come around again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and basically, from what I understand, I mean, you're like a one-woman show in terms of like basically doing all that, right?
Yeah, well, I am. I do work with the Oregon booking agency, James, and then Soundstage Review, Sal Bleidenberg, he books some of our Soundstage Review shows. So those are some of the bigger events that we do.
Yeah.
So,
do you travel much outside of the area for some bookings? Or is it
occasionally I do.
Yeah.
Occasionally I do. That would be generated by my putting that together.
Right.
So I'm looking towards that for this coming year. So I've got some ideas of what I'd like to do. So.
All right. And what about in terms of like we've talked a bit about the songwriting process. Do you find that there's a consistency to like sources of inspiration for the songs that you develop?
On some level, my personal experiences in life, my own struggles with things or realizations, stories of people that I care about, and I'd say I'm always trying to bring healing or mending to aspects of my life, and so the music is a way that I guess need to voice that.
That seems to be kind of like a pretty consistency thing across nearly all musicians that I know of, right?
Yeah.
They use the musical process to deal with issues in their life and issues around them, and kind of use that music as a healing tool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. And music for me has always been a healing tool. So, it's just kind of spilling over into these songs that hopefully come through me. So,
well, it's an interesting aspect of life, isn't it? That musicians use that vehicle of music to go about kind of expressing and dealing with personal issues, important issues, right? That then go out to the rest of society, right? And that we then take that music and the message through the music to kind of take that in and also process, that in and how it affects us, as individuals, right? And I find it an interesting aspect about society and as a species that we use this music as a way to kind of positively influence each other compared to other ways that can be so much more negative, right?
Yeah, and I think that, has always been the role of art and expression, is to create that medium. I mean, it's really a need.
Yeah.
And so many people don't even realize that is part of their, what they have to offer as well. And a side note, some work that I do is working with music with at-risk teenagers. And so offering them music as a voice, for whether it's just music that they hear and they learn how to play it on the piano, or writing their own songs, but just to give access to that, because there's a certain ownership in being able to share your experience.
That's right.
And whatever that is, through art, through media, like what you're doing, or whatever that is. I think we all have that somewhere. Creating children, or whatever that. Cookies. I don't know. it's all art.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the programs in Medford that have featured here is the Life Art Gallery program, which is about giving art as a vehicle to help at-risk teens. Kind of help to deal with their stuff. And so what you do with music, they do with physical art, painting and drawing and that kind of thing, right? But all the different creative arts certainly serve as a very expressive means of kind of dealing with everything in life, right?
Yeah.
And there certainly needs to be more of that, I think, and when I see school programs that kind of cut investment in the arts, I think it adversely affects not only the students but society in general. I think there needs to be more investment in that.
I agree. Because that's our heart and our soul.
That's right.
And it helps create balance in the world. I believe. Yeah, I really do.
So what, you got an event coming up this afternoon. What else other events that you got coming up?
Well, I will be at the Urban Cork with John Galfano. And that, I'm not sure when this will be aired, so I guess the timeline that won't necessarily fit. But so I'll be at the Urban Cork, some of the wineries over at Schmidt Family Vineyards later in September. Several wineries have their wine club events now, so it's that time of year. So I'll be doing some private parties that way. The wineries, it seems, well, since I became active here as a producer at the studio, and kind of begun to make my inroads into the music scene and making connections, right? I really have been impressed by how the local wineries have become kind of like a really great venue, right, for the music community around here. That is true. I'm so grateful to them, because it is. I mean, you want to know where people are going to be playing? Find a winery.
That's right.
Find somebody, over there. So it's been great.
So I think for the Road Valley, it's really become a really great addition to the culture of our community.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. I think it's made a.
And because I have made visits to many of the wineries as part of my effort to find guests, right, for my own shows, and so many of them are just so beautifully scenic, right, in their setup, right.
They are. Yeah, it's very aesthetic, and they're doing some very cool things over there. Yeah.
So where are you at in terms of new songs that you're working on? And you've got like 4 CDs? You got how many CDs?
Well, I carry around 3 with me, but I've got some other ones as well, some collaborations that I don't really have any CDs left of. But I'm currently working on a blues project, doing some co-writing with Ken Orso, a local voice teacher, actually. And so putting that together as we speak,
Yeah.
but still writing other, my Americana style songs as well. So constantly writing, and I'm not performing all the time. Then when I have a day off, then I start writing. So.
Yeah, and so when do you expect to have your next CD blues project that you're working on? When do you expect that to come
I'm
together?
probably going to start releasing some of the songs within the next couple of months while writing some more pieces to complete for this. So I think the finished product will be beginning of next year.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'm guessing maybe sooner.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
When you start a songwriting session on a song idea, how long do you work on that idea to bring it to completion?
It depends. Some songs, it's just I start in an evening and it's done that night. Other songs will take months.
Yeah.
Or longer. So it depends on the gestation of the song.
Yeah.
The idea, the feel.
I'm a big fan of Garth Brooks. My car is stuck on his Sirius radio station. It's a really great station in that Garth tells a lot of stories about his songwriting behind different songs, hits of his, right? And I find it's been a fascinating thing learning, the experience of how ideas have been brought together, how some seem to be done really quick, and others can just take forever to, and he talks about the path of a song to find its way out into the world.
It is true. Yeah.
And it's a fascinating thing to kind of learn. When you listen to a song, typically you just kind of absorb the song, and you don't really think so much about how the song came to being. But once you start learning stories about the songs and how they do come to being, it's a fascinating process.
It is.
So.
It is.
Well, Jen, I'm getting the signal for the wrap up.
Okay.
I thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been fun.
Much.
I knew that when I got you on, this is going to be a fun, easy flowing conversation. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, David. This is great. I love what you're doing here, and thanks for
you.
having me be
happy.
a part of it.
I'm happy to do it. All right, Road Valley. Well, we reached the end of my interview with Jen Ambrose, and so I want to thank her. I want to thank the crew for all the help in putting the show together. And we will wrap this up, and we will see you next time, Road Valley.
All right.
And that's it for this edition of the Small Interview for tonight. We're always eager to hear what you have to say, so follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and support this show at our Patreon page at patreon.com/GlamourDave. You can send us your comments to viewer@glamourdave.com.